Europe is tooling up on defence. A sector which had gone cold has suddenly gotten very hot.
For years, the continent neglected its security, but now the need to defend itself from foes and ever more fragile friendships has become abundantly clear. As demand and production ramp up, European defence companies are booming. Since the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, European defence companies have doubled and even tripled in value. In this episode, we'll take you to companies at the centre of the rearming of Europe.
We will speak to the CEO of one of Europe's leading defence firms and find out firsthand how the sector is adjusting to the new reality.
What if we were to continue where we come from, grossly underspending on defence? We're facing an adversary and the Ukrainians are actually fighting for their very existence.
And we'll ask what all the money is being spent on and whether the defence industry could inject desperately needed momentum into the European economy. It's all coming up on Business Beyond. First, to get an understanding of how the new era of defence investment is playing out for companies, we've come here to Germany's central Harz region to visit Ilsenberger Grobblech, a maker of steel slabs. As Thorsten Gintaut, the company's managing director, explains, it's been a tough few years for the steel sector in Germany and Europe.
The last 2 years were not good, not good at all. And why is that? Because as every steel company, we are suffering due to high energy costs we have here in Europe we have to deal with, and at the same time we are suffering with quite low steel prices, too low steel prices compared to the cost level we have, mainly because of overcapacity and because of imports coming from companies or from countries outside of Europe into Europe on a price level which is not sustainable for us.
Ilsenberger Grobblech makes steel for many sectors, especially wind energy and construction. But, as outlined by Thorsten Gintaut, these are tough times for manufacturing firms like theirs, with a general trend of deindustrialization raising existential questions. In an attempt to find a new niche, the company took the decision in 2017 to invest heavily in a growing but complicated new division, so-called secure steels.
Those slabs of steel produced at this facility have many possible uses, but an increasingly important one for this business is for the production of what's known as armour-grade steel, which is needed for, among other things, the production of military tanks.
Producing steel for defence companies which supply the German armed forces is not easy. This heat treatment facility, essential for the production of armour-grade steel, took 5 years to build and required massive investment from Ilsenberger Grobblech's parent company Salzgitter. Then there's the question of the product meeting the necessary standards of the German armed forces.
What makes it so demanding is that the quality standards the Bundeswehr is asking for are very high, and the test procedures they have to do before we get the approval to deliver to those companies take time-wise very long time, and also again the quality standards are very high, so it just takes a lot of time and effort to get through the process.
The company's head of product development says that ultimately steel for the defence sector is still a relatively small part of their output, and that they will be able to scale back or scale up when necessary.
Es ist ein sehr interessantes Nischenprodukt, von daher passt es sehr gut in unser Portfolio, aber wir können da beliebig switchen und selbst wenn wir die Menge verdoppeln oder verdreifachen sollen oder müssen, wäre das kein Problem für uns.
Companies like Ilsenberger Grobblech clearly see the defence sector as a possible way to offset the many headwinds they have been facing.
And when we look at developments in that sector, it's easy to see why some people see it as a potential saviour.
European defence is big business by any measure now. EU member states spent almost €400 billion on defence in 2025. Some of Europe's biggest defence companies include Airbus Defence and Space, Germany's Rheinmetall and the UK's BAE Systems. They are part of a group of European defence firms experiencing a huge surge in growth.
The defence sector's surge is rooted in European governments having decided to ramp up investment in their militaries. and that was a decision that was made necessary by Russia's invasion of Ukraine and increasing uncertainty over the USA's commitment to the NATO alliance.
Turnover has been increasing sharply. From 2021 to 2024, European defence sector turnover climbed by 48% to more than 180 billion euros. It's a big employer too. Including its civil and aerospace aspects, the sector now employs more than 1.1 million people in the EU, with more than 300,000 jobs added in the last decade. We've gotten an insight into what it means for suppliers to the sector, but what about for the major defence companies themselves?
We've come here to the Airbus military aircraft production facility at Manching, just north of Munich, to see a part of Europe's defence scale-up up close.
This is an example of pan-European cooperation in defence production.
Here at this final assembly line, aircraft described as being part of the backbone of European defence are assembled. The Eurofighter Typhoon fighter jet.
It's also a rare success story. A persistent complaint about European defence is that its various national industries don't work well together and struggle to collaborate on joint projects. One example, a project between France, Germany and Spain, the Future Combat Air System, or FCAS, is reportedly close to collapse. So that makes this project symbolically and practically important. Eurofighter Typhoon jets are built as part of a consortium involving Airbus in Germany and Spain, the UK's BAE Systems and Italy's Leonardo. Before 2022, when European governments were still dragging their heels on defence investment, the Eurofighter programme was struggling. The US-made F-35 stealth fighter was seen as by far the preferred choice in European capitals. While Germany has continued to buy F-35s, it has also ramped up demand for the Eurofighter. Last October, the government approved a €3.75 billion order for 20 new Eurofighters, in addition to 38 ordered in 2020. Spain, Italy and Turkey have also made significant orders recently, meaning the books are quite full for the coming years, according to Andreas Hammer, head of Combat Air Systems at Airbus and the site director here in Manching.
So the Eurofighter is playing an incredible role for bringing sovereignty and deterrence and defense capabilities to these countries. And yes, we have an incredible momentum right now, and we are ramping up.
Marco Gumbrecht is the head of sales for Combat Air Systems at Airbus, but before he took on that role, he spent a decade in the cockpit of the Eurofighter itself as a fighter pilot, taking part in several NATO operations. As the threat from Russia escalates, the Eurofighter has become especially important in securing the Baltic airspace.
From a deterrent standpoint, it's by far the most used aircraft on NATO's eastern flank, and that's just been going on for many, many, many years.
But he says the Eurofighter programme and the sector generally is not just about defence, but about wider innovation.
Besides just quote-unquote providing security and deterrence, it's obviously also securing high-tech jobs in the areas for our countries. And you know, in the past, let's say 20, 30 years ago, all the high-tech innovation, most notably GPS, for instance, came from military equipment. And with all the investments now going, not just into procuring new airplanes, but the tech that's inside, you know, there's a big space for innovation coming from the military sector that's dual use and flow into the civilian side, mostly on AI aspects of it.
And as the order books fill up here, Andreas Hammer says the advantage of the Eurofighter programme is that it helps to both develop strategic sovereignty and can boost the local economy.
In case of tensions and conflict and war, you don't want to be dependent from some others. And you never know whether the alliances and friendships are changing. The second point is, by doing so, of course, you are creating a job machine. Just for the Eurofighter program, the Eurofighter program is creating 100,000 jobs in Europe, 25,000 jobs just in Germany. We have 400 suppliers, and a lot of suppliers, I think more than 100 suppliers just in Germany, to build on that. So you're creating jobs. By doing that, you also bring back money which you invested, because via taxes, tax return, you have the people employed.
Some have made the connection between the rearming of Europe and a possible reinvigoration of its flagging industrial base. But many have doubts about this. A growing criticism, particularly here in Germany, is that far too much of the new spending has been on traditional military equipment, things like tanks and fighter jets, and that not enough has been on more innovative technology, things like AI-enabled military tech or drones, which have been so important on the battlefield during the war in Ukraine. Then there's the charge that European countries don't collaborate well enough on defence. The Eurofighter project is one example that clearly does work, but in too many other areas, Europe's defence giants are struggling to come together. To consider some of these questions and the wider context of Europe's big bet on defence, we sat down with Mike Schulhorn. He's the CEO of Airbus Defence and Space and is one of the leading voices in the sector. So obviously so much has changed in the 4.5 years that you've been CEO of Airbus Defence and Space in the defence sector itself. And when you look at the numbers, when we look at a graph and we see the percentage of GDP that different countries like Germany, France, the UK, Poland have been spending historically on their defence, and how that's changing at the moment and indeed projected to change over the coming years, going from where they were struggling to hit the 2% mark to trying to hit these new targets of 3.5%, 5%. It's a huge change. How is Airbus and companies like Airbus adjusting to this new reality?
Well, indeed, that's quite a remarkable change that I have personally gone through and that the company has gone through. When I joined mid-21, I think Germany was at a 1.6% of GDP spending. Now we're above 2 already, and we aim for 3.5. So that's basically doubling everything that Germany is spending within a relatively short amount of time. For the company, it's meant a major transformation. We came from a time where sort of the spending was meant to sort of keep you in the race, but spread out and delay everything as much as possible. And now the opposite is important. How can we scale up faster? How can we deliver faster? And that's a huge change that's sometimes underestimated in terms of the mindsets of people.
And one of the criticisms of all this new spending that has been clearly pumped in by the German government, among others, in the last few years, and this criticism has been particularly of Germany, that too much of that spending is on so-called traditional defence equipment. So things that are obviously needed, tanks and fighter jets and so on, but that not enough is going towards the kind of innovative technologies which may boost innovation and the economy in the longer term. And just to give you one figure, so Moritz Schülerich from the Kiel Institute of the World Economy, I think he has come up with data that suggests that between 95 and 98% of that new spending since 2022 has been on this traditional tech. So what do you think about this question, this issue?
Well, I know Moritz well, and I know his statement, and I concur with him. I think this is not the end point of what it should be. Now, we also have to recognize that Germany and the Bundeswehr, as the German armed forces, come from a time when there was huge holes in what they should have been able to do in the first place. Those holes need to be plugged. That does, at least initially, require a lot of spending of what you already have as systems. Now, those are not non-innovative, but it's certainly not largely going towards AI, towards unmanned systems, towards all these, let's say, very innovative things. I think that's going to get ramped up pretty significantly in the near future. It's already gearing up. The procurement process is also already getting ready to also do a better job when it comes to these innovative things that you cannot plan so much in advance. So I think it takes a little bit of time. As always, we complain that everything's going too slow. I think there's a reason why the current distribution is what it is, but it has to change.
I want to move on now to another area. So a word that we commonly hear when we talk about EU problems, economic or otherwise, is fragmentation. It's obvious that when you have 27 different governments, it's very hard to work together in the same way that someone like the US, one government, can work. Just first of all, can you tell me how much of an issue is this at present in practical terms for the defence industry in Europe?
Well, it is still a huge issue. I mean, all these factors, if you look at major battle systems, from tanks to aircraft to ships to whatever, the average is that the US, which still has a significantly higher defence budget than Europe, at least as we speak. Europe, on the other hand, has 5 times more number of systems or types of systems. So we sprinkle less money over more systems, and that provides a factor of more than 10x. It's actually more in the ballpark of 50x in terms of money per system. So, of course, the US is better at scaling, is better at driving the cost point down, And that's still a huge issue in Europe. I think it's recognized, and politicians have talked a lot about it. I think we need to be very careful that with all the money that's now being made available through national budgets, the reflex to then have that geo-return into your own country is not amplifying the problem. I think I see signs of that. So I think it's something that's not very healthy. On the other hand, there's companies like mine that exists and that were created exactly to help fight fragmentation and come to European projects of scale that can then help improve the situation.
Well, on that note, we visited the Eurofighter facility close to here, and that's clearly a very good example of this type of cross-border collaboration within Europe. But Airbus is also involved in the FCAS programme, the Franco-German programme, which is now 10 years old in its conception, but which does not seem to be working out at the moment. What can you tell us about how that project is going and what that tells us about the problems affecting this collaboration, which we clearly need between the likes of France, Germany and the other major European defence powers?
Yeah, not totally unexpected, the question. But let me start with the statement that Future Combat Air System, FCAS, is much more than a plane. It's much more than a fighter aircraft. It is a combat cloud at the very core of it. It is unmanned systems. It is sensors. It's simulation capabilities. And most of that is working extremely well. Yes, there's a problem in the manned fighter between two companies. Mine is one of them. It's a reminder that if you start on these big European projects, it takes more than the political will. It takes the industrial alignment of the players involved. We have that in Eurofighter. We have that for other big programs that we have, like A400. We have that in many cases in space. In FCAS, I think we're still struggling with it. But if we assume that we end up with two fighters in a bigger project that has all these other assets and other means, then that wouldn't be the end of the world. It wouldn't be the end of Franco-German-Spanish collaboration, and it would actually make FCAS more resilient.
Because there have been reports that FCAS is on its last legs. I mean, they haven't been confirmed, but what can you tell us? I mean, is there any prospect?
There will be an FCAS. There will have to be some restructuring in certain parts of the project. It was defined, let's not forget, in 2017, at the height of probably the peace dividend period, with probably not so much in mind that we would ever potentially have to use these products and systems that come out of it. We have a totally different world now, and now speed is of the essence. The times where you could define something very precisely with long requirements lists that would then come 15 or 20 years later are over. The speed of change is so rapid that we also need to change the mode of how we develop things, so there's a restructuring of FCAS needed anyways.
You mentioned the peace dividend. There will be people watching this programme, perhaps in Germany or other parts of Europe, who are concerned about the kind of defence spending numbers that we're seeing, and they probably think about things like, well, I liked it when governments had more money to spend on social care, on health care, on education perhaps. This perception of what a peace dividend means. What's your view on that? Do you think that those concerns are in any way justified, that too much has been spent on defence?
I understand the concerns. I think we all would wish a world where we have enough money for the elderly, for health care, for education, for university, for everything. And it's not that Europe is now, not spending anything anymore to up their game in defense. But if we flip the logic and we say, like, what if we were to continue where we come from, grossly underspending on defense? We're facing an adversary, and the Ukrainians are actually fighting for their very existence and their very values in their democracies. I don't want to be in that situation. I think the spending in defense goes towards deterrent, and deterrence of a potential adversary. And the better we do that, the more we can secure that our children and their children can also enjoy what I hold very, very dear in my heart, and that's a Western democracy. It's a liberal way of speaking. It's having people that have a totally opposite opinion, who our armed forces also fight for their freedom to speak up. So I think it's not an either or. I think we need to do both. But we have definitely underspent on defense now, in the past. We now need to catch up. How long will it last at that level? I don't know. I don't think it will go away anytime soon. But hopefully we'll come to a time when it maybe equals out, potentially at the old famous number of 2% of GDP.
And then finally, Mike, what is your view to this question? Let's assume a best case scenario in terms of the defence situation. But in terms of the longer-term economic situation, are you optimistic that the current wave of spending that we're seeing in the defence sector can benefit the economy in the longer term?
Well, the short answer is yes. You look at countries like the US or like Israel that have been extremely successful in turning defense spending into overall economic growth and prosperity and leading-edge technologies. Israel wouldn't be where it is today as a startup nation without their big defense spending. Europe's not yet there. Europe has to learn that. That also means, as I said before, and you asked, we need to direct more of the defense spending into very innovative systems. Then we're going to have a longer lasting effect. But we also need, at least as far as we need to catch up, we need to spend some money on the let's say, current and sometimes even legacy systems to just close the biggest holes. So I think there's a bridge to connect the two.
One of the most important lessons we learned when making this episode is that defence spending, which focuses on innovation, research and development, can lead to wider innovation in the economy. And if there's one thing that Europe needs as much as a dynamic and innovative defence sector, it's a dynamic and innovative economy.
For many, Europe's spending spree is primarily about security, but it clearly raises wider economic questions.
Those hoping that Europe's defence spending boom could lead to a wholesale revitalisation of the economy could be in for some disappointment.
That's particularly true if the spending continues to tilt so heavily in favour of building the kind of things which can quickly get destroyed without adding much to longer-term growth prospects. But if Europe can harness the momentum and sense of purpose prompted by Russia's war in Ukraine and find a way to work better together, it can do more than just secure its borders. It can provide the innovation ecosystem its economy needs and offer alternatives to sectors caught in the crosswinds of change.
Throughout history, war has forced governments to act in ways that they would never consider in peacetime. For many years now, it's been clear that Europe's economy needs the electroshock treatment, and it finally appears to be getting it, whether it's ready or not. That's it for this episode of Business Beyond. Thanks a lot for watching, and until the next time, take care.